And one of the things that I really puzzled me about in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they about prayer flags and saying prayer. There's a lot of praying in Buddhism in general, and I thought, well, that's great, but I mean, what kind of good does this do? What is it? Am I actually changing something? If my conscience is bothering me, I want to help somehow. Is just praying, is that enough? I mean, is that really? So, and I don't really know the answer to that. There's been some studies done on the effectiveness of prayer, and it's been scientifically proven that people praying for somebody who are having, let's say, medical issues, it actually makes changes in their ability to recover in a positive way. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about Chatrao Rinpoche's. He wrote a long prayer called a prayer to avert nuclear war, and there's so much in there. As a matter of fact, what we might do is I might send that out next time so we could talk about it, because there's some really interesting points he makes in there. And the point is that we don't really know what's going to happen. In the Native American traditions, they know something's going to happen, but don't really know exactly what. And in the Hindu tradition, the same thing, the Kali Yuga. What I was thinking of that, how does life, collective life, move forward? And it moves forward by the actions of every single person. And now, because of the earth as well, she's done just supporting things, and she's now in a recovery mode. And is kind of the way I look at it, to deal with and rebalance from some of the damage that's been done. And but what moves life forward is the actions of people and the energy of people, if you will. And so I was thinking about Gandhi's famous quote that be the change that you want to see in the world. And when I first read that, I was very impressed by it, because I think it's really spot on intuitively, though I didn't quite understand the details and all that's involved in that. But what that means is, who knows how we can be of service? We have no idea. Maybe something as simple as giving somebody a lift or taking them to the hospital, bringing them home from the hospital, or donating to a charity. Sometimes we can't really plan what the good is that we're going to do. I mean, we're not, if we happen to be in a position of power or authority, in that sense, perhaps we could do things through the channels that we have with our employment or service or whatever. So, but for us sort of mundane people, it's like, I'm not in charge of millions of people or hundreds of people or even tens of people, not even in charge of my family, thank goodness, and they're grateful for that. So I'm not ruling anybody. But I thought about, what if more and more people really wanted to be the change that they want to see in the world, and that somehow doing that is that we become the seeds of the future. And what that means to me too is that if we're doing the best we can and pass on the best that we have to our children and family and others around us, then that has a way of resonating out from there also. And when we do that, we do the best we can, in my opinion, whatever it may be. I've talked before about people, whether it's a bus driver or somebody bagging groceries or whatever, just sharing a joke or paying them a compliment or opening the door for somebody. The way I feel about it is that sometimes, no matter how small, it can make a great difference somehow. I don't really know. But since humanity, when we all flow forward, so to speak, we all continue, there's sort of this rolling roll call of human beings, and we're part of that. And if what we're doing in our lives is the best that we can do to make a contribution to the people around us, or maybe even beyond, then that has a way of rippling out, the ripple effect, as I mentioned in the email. So, but when I began thinking about that we are the seeds of the future, I began to think in terms of generations. Whether we have children or not ourselves, we usually have children in our family somewhere. And what's their life going to be like? And what's their kids' lives going to be like? And so it has a way, those things have a way of following through the generations. I have a really strong connection with several of my grandkids. And it's just wonderful. That's going to be at some point, when they're old enough and they're somebody's grandkid, it's grandparent, that they'll be able to carry that forward, what was meaningful to them from our relationship, into the relationships with their grandchildren. And that continues. I've been listening to the news lately, as I do. I like to keep track of the outrageous things that are happening, and some of the people who are speaking up now, it's really quite extraordinary. There are people voicing their conscience, and it's really I've been really impressed. I mean, these people, they're from judges or in business or some in the government. They're just quite clear about what's going on and what is and what is not acceptable, and exactly in my opinion, exactly what the consequences are of some of the bad, so-called bad behavior, problematic behavior. And it's really refreshing to hear good, solid, assertive conscience being spoken of what is true and what is not true. Now, I don't know if you all noticed that some of the advertisements for movies, streaming, series and stuff, they now have AI images. And I was thinking, it's not enough to just have this artificial environment through screens, but now on the screens we have artificial people. And I feel like I can tell the difference between something that's AI and what isn't. But what that means is that we're creating an environment where we don't really know what's true and what's not true. I heard something, I forget where I heard this, but there was, it was news. There was an audio recording of some news article. And I'm listening to this person, I'm just kind of like, and at the very end it said it was an AI voice. And it's perfectly in line with what's going on in terms of there's been a lot of lying going on for the last 10 years. Well, there's been a lot of lying going on for a long time, a lot longer than that. But but it's really it's really spread out. It's really proliferated, so that some people think the best answer is, no, I didn't do that. So it makes being able to tell the truth from the false more difficult. And when that happens, it interrupts or disturbs our sense of reality, both consciously and unconsciously. And so what that does, it throws us back into a sort of refuge in our own conscience. That's where we know really what is acceptable and not acceptable. And when we feel that way, that something is unacceptable, we tend to take some kind of action about it, which is really important, as I often comment. So the entire world culture is going more and more into a state of unreality. And it's up to us. I think people like us that are interested in balance and connection and wisdom and compassion, and not only for ourselves but carrying that into other people in our lives, that's important. It's really important to understand what's going on. But ultimately, if we stop and think about it, and like the example I gave, that the connection I have with my grandchildren, they're going to carry on in their lives. It's that meaningful, and that when they're grandparents, the same thing they're going to give their grandchildren, and that keeps on going. And that really, enough people do that, it really has a significant effect on the world. So I'm finding that knowing that somehow I am a seed of the future really it really sort of calmed down my concern about how to be effective and helpful in times like this. And basically, one of the ways that I interpret that, being a seed of the future, is my own quality of life and what I do and I don't do in my life, and that my life itself is part of that seed. Now, what does a seed actually do? And this fascinates me, is that you take a seed and you put it in a seed for a purple flower, and you put it in the dirt, okay? And you wait for it to germinate. And then you take a seed for a yellow flower and you put it in the dirt next to the other one. When they start to grow and then they flower, you have a yellow flower and a purple flower in the same dirt. Now, I don't know what was yellow in one dirt and purple in the other, or how that all happens. But the seeds make a discernment between, they identify what in the soil is going to make purple and what's going to make, or whether one's going to be a medicine plant and the other one's going to be an herb or a spice, or what's going to be poison. So the seed itself makes a determination of what to accept and what to reject. Each seed is accepting and rejecting different things. And so if we are the seeds of the future, then that implies that we have some good idea about what to accept and what to reject. And when we do that, then we become a contributor to the future in some way, whether or not that's personally, or that's through our children or our friends, or whatever that may be. And when I kind of struck upon that, if I really do consider myself a seed of the future, that relieved a lot of kind of subliminal anxiety for me. Because, giving everything in one's life to the best of our ability to our friends and family and to ourselves, and learning and growing and spiritual development and such, and we do everything we can, that's it. That's all we can do, whatever that may be. But that somehow contributes to the greater good. I don't know if anybody knows about the Greater Good Science Center, but they're in University of Berkeley, and they've been doing research on quality of life now for probably 20 years. A wonderful group, and they have an online magazine with all the research and such. very helpful. But I like the idea of a greater good. So that what we have now, I think we're all here and people like us elsewhere really want the greater good. And when we practice that, then that will have some kind of an effect going forward. So I say this because most sessions, most modules, I feel impelled to continue to address this issue of how can we live sanely when things are really out of control. And not only just superficially, but really deeply, too. And when thinking about that, the principle of we can only do the best we can is in order. So we do the best we can, and at the end of the day, or the end of our life, we go, did I do the best I could? Yes, that would be the answer. And that brings peace of mind. And I've told this story before, but it's apropos here. The friend of mine I mentioned had a really hard time staying sober, and in and out of ERs and that kind of thing. And so he started doing some trauma work, and he started meditating, and he really made up his mind to try to deal with his addictions. And so finally he got sober. And about 2.5 years after getting clean and sober, they found spots all over his liver. I mean, to the point where they said, sorry, this is, it's too much. The liver is too strong, too much affected. So from that diagnosis, it took about 1.5 or 2 months before he passed. And I was with him a couple of days. It was about a day or two before he died. And he started going in and out of, kind of like, there's a term for it, something medical. It's like a medical psychosis. He would talk gibberish for a while, and then he'd be okay, and then he'd talk gibberish. And at one point, he looked at me. He said, "I'm okay." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I'm okay. I'm ready to go. I'm at peace." And I thought, at first, that's really good. I'm happy for him. And that all the struggles he had took him to the place where he could die peacefully. He was 2.5 years clean and sober when he died. Even though he struggled probably 20 years or more trying to get sober. And so he did, from my perspective, he did the absolute best he could. And in doing the best he could, in the end, it was okay. And so when a lot of folks are concerned, people of good conscience tend to often ask the question, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Can I do more? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. You're doing just fine. Or sometimes, have you thought about this? Maybe doing this. If you still feel like you're not doing enough, what about this? And we start thinking about ways in which we can carry the benefits that we've gotten from prayer and meditation and community and mindful self-compassion and somehow bringing that to other people. But something to continue the ways of clarity and the ways of compassion and the ways of wisdom more into our lives and the lives of people around us. So, and also I hadn't thought about these books in a long time, but there's two books, The Enlightened Heart and The Enlightened Mind, and they're both translated by Coleman Barks, and the Enlightened, I forget which is which, but one is stories and the other is poetry. but they're wonderful. And I like to. People who are interested in spirituality in general don't really have a particular religious path. Tend to give those as presents to folks like that. Because even if you do have a particular spiritual path, the wisdom and compassion is universal, and the stories are applicable to whatever discipline that somebody chooses to follow. And I gave that, just recently gave that to a gal who celebrated 40 years of sobriety. And we'll see what she has to say. But it's important to pass whatever we have, to pass it on. Make sure we pass it on, whatever it is, and in whatever way we can. And it may be in the work that we do. It may be in, well, it can be done in many ways. But to make sure that we're not keeping anything for ourselves, so to speak. Just for, well, and knowing that we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to care for other people. The most important principle of self-compassion. So I guess we'll start doing this thing and put it all into practice, and concept into practice. And we'll start with a little bit longer than usual mindfulness meditation, and then we'll go into a self-compassion meditation. So, finding a comfortable position and settling in, and we'll begin. Settling into our body and settling into our chair or wherever we're sitting. And settling with ease as best we can. Just, it says, like stopping the clock and dropping out of the time flow into our location in time and space we call the human body. And as usual, if anything arises in the form of thoughts or emotions, simply recognizing them and letting them go, and bringing our awareness back to the present moment. And allowing our breath to be free and easy and soft. And allowing our body to be still. And recognizing every time a thought or a feeling arises. And letting it go if we've latched onto it a little bit. Or just recognizing it as a thought or a feeling. And let it just pass on through. And continuing to settle in and ease into stillness as best we can. And sometimes I'm surprised at how much the body likes being still. It's almost or it seems nurturing to the body, stillness. And continuing to let the weight of our body settle, held in place by gravity. And just allowing whatever arises in the brain, the mind, letting it arise and letting it go, or just flow on through. Allowing us to settle into stillness, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Allowing us to be aware of the space between thoughts. Maybe only a second or two at a time. But allowing us to just sit and be aware of that space between thoughts as best we can. Settling in ease, relaxed and awake at the same time. Not needing anything, not pushing away anything. Nothing to fix, just being. And perhaps feeling a sense of being at home in the here and now. sort of like settling into this realm of being okay. Coming to rest in the now. A space that is different and familiar seems to be. Familiar feeling. Familiar being. And allowing all the aspects of our being to come to rest. And in this clear space, inviting, invoking, or welcoming compassion to flourish and flow in toward oneself, whatever that self may be. It may come in any form, like a sense of warmth, or seeing light, or hearing sound. Or just feeling in our solar plexus this thing of compassion, this experience of compassion for oneself. and for oneself, not just now, but from our 9 months in the womb, and from our first breath being born. And the difficulties along the way. Whether they're harsh treatment or experiences we've had from others. Or things that we've done that later really bothered our conscience. Or sometimes that are just plain difficult. We've endured much of this being human. And allowing ourselves to accept this compassion. Not knowing where it comes from or how it is generated. All we need to do is accept. And allow it in and through our being as best we can. Knowing with a full heart that we are not perfect, but certainly good enough. And have struggled like every other human being and creature on the planet. And accepting this without explanation, without words. Allowing this compassion to flood throughout every aspect of our being. And accepting it as fully as possible. No need to try to understand. And being kind and compassionate towards oneself. Whatever the difficulties have been. Just compassion flooding our being. And receiving it as easily as a sponge would accept water. And letting it soak in to every aspect of our being, in every space, no matter how tiny it may be, in our being. And settling into its presence. Which feels like our natural state. Fully imbued with this mysterious and wonderful force called compassion. As we absorb this state in its fullness, bringing a sense of completion of this short journey, nonetheless deep. And with a sense of compassion coming back to the mindfulness state of equanimity. Sort of filling it up as air would fill a room. And coming to a state of rest, of completion, from this journey. And absorbing it as fully as we can, so that when the bell rings again, we can bring this with us as we go about our day and come back to it at any time.